There is a hurricane a-blowing out there. I'm currently standing in Florida, and I want to talk to you about how I've lived in this place my entire life. I am a Florida man. This is JARHUMOR speaking, and the skies are gray. The rain is vertical. No, wait, the rain is horizontal. That's the scarier one. The rain's normally vertical. I got those two confused. See, if I'd owned more horizontal blinds in my life. Actually, I own nothing but horizontal. Once again, I'm getting it confused. I own nothing but horizontal blinds. If I owned more vertical blinds. So I've lived in Florida my entire life. And everything that they say about Florida is true. All the cliches are true. It's hot. It's humid. There's a mama duck with all the little baby ducks walking down the street trying to get away from the horizontal rain. They're seeking shelter. There are signs in my neighborhood that inform me that it is illegal to feed alligators. This is not something that's near a theme park attraction like a Gatorland, but this is in my neighborhood, near a canal. There are signs with a picture of an alligator saying it's illegal to feed alligators. Don't do it. That's Florida. The weather, this hurricane, hurricane blowing through. I'm not getting a direct hit from it. But it was a close call. It was scary enough that they closed the schools today, and I was a little concerned. I live in a mobile home. That's another like frightening thing. I live in a mobile home in Florida. I live a very exciting, frightening life, and this place that I live in was built in the 70s, and it's seen some hurricanes. Most of it is not, like the roof is completely different now because we lost the roof at one point. The porch is completely different. I have a shed the old shed just exploded during one hurricane. So yeah, why Florida? Well, my family decided to move here. I was born in Houston, Texas. My parents were married in the Joel Osteen megachurch thing. And I guess my grandparents moved down here. I know they had lived up in Ohio, Illinois type area. My grandfather being from, I believe, Kentucky. My father's parents being from Oklahoma. All I know is that I'm not half Cherokee, a quarter Cherokee. Which the Janine Garofalo joke is, hey, stop saying you're a quarter Cherokee. At least pick a different tribe and a different ratio. And it's like, no, but I'm a maybe 1/8 Cherokee, but it is Cherokee. It's Oklahoma Cherokee. And then my grandfathers on both sides had Cherokee in them. And you both could see it in them. My grandfathers on both sides were half Cherokee. I don't know what that makes me. Probably nothing. That's sort of one of those things. I don't know. I'm going off. I want to talk about living in Florida. Why Florida? My grandparents moved down here, and my grandfather loved to fish. He got a place around Lake Okeechobee, which I lived there as a child. I no longer live out in the wilderness as we did, also in a mobile home. Right off of Lake Okeechobee. That was interesting. I didn't realize how scary that was when I was a child. Like the whole idea that you had to shake your shoes out when you got up in the morning because you didn't know what was in the shoe. Could be a snake. Could be a giant spider. There were giant spiders. We called them palm spiders because they hung out on palm trees and they were the size of your hand. They were palm spiders. You didn't want one of those in your shoe. Even though I think they were harmless, it's just the freaky ass things. They would just climb across the walls. I'd be like, oh, just as a child, that was the most frightening thing in the entire world. These gigantic spiders. that laid flat and moved very quickly, for very short durations, and then just would stop and just stare at you for an hour. And yeah, and snakes. We had snakes that would somehow sneak into the utility room, the porch area. Alligators that we were so close to the lake, and by canal systems, sometimes it's like, oh, you can't go in the backyard, kids. Not today. There's an alligator passing through. Just give him some time. Sure, he'll leave. Let's hope he leaves. Let's hope he doesn't decide to stay and bring some friends. And they'd leave. The alligators would leave. My grandfather had to own guns to protect from the wildlife. Like he had like this .22 rifle, and he had his 38 and everything like that. Like I grew up very rednecky sort of life. I don't sound like a redneck, which is curious, and that's because of my mother. My mother hated the redneck side of the family. She couldn't stand it. Her second husband sounded like a hick. I was a product of her third marriage. And that's a whole nother story of how my mother's a real piece of work. That two marriages had to fall apart for me to even exist and live in Florida, where it is so humid. But my mother hated the redneckiness, so she always encouraged me to speak very well. So I am well spoken because of my mother. So I guess that's good. What's good is I can also just kind of slip into this whenever I want to, and it's not really phony because what I was doing before is more the phony talking. Well, I'm talking like a fancy city person. This is actually more natural. So every once in a while you'll hear me say y'all. And living in Florida, the humidity, like right now, it is very humid in the house. I mean, there's a hurricane out there, but normally, especially during the summer, it's been so humid in my home. Mold has been developing in moist areas. I had a leak underneath the sink that I didn't realize. It was a slow leak, and mold had developed underneath the sink, and it was making me sick. For a period of nearly a year and a half, I didn't realize it at first, and I had no clue what it was that was making me sick. And the house is old and musky. Everyone's like, well, musky means mold, and everyone's an expert, and everyone's all of a sudden a mold expert. But then luckily, because I'm supposed to be a cartoonist. That's my given trade, but the robots took my job, so now I work in a grocery store. And my redneck, and them robots took my job. I used to be a cartoonist. I used to draw them funny pictures for them people. Them robots took my job. So now I work at a grocery store. But luckily there was this customer, this cute girl that I was flirting with. Her boyfriend does mold removal, and she recommended a bunch of stuff, including a dehumidifier. Does this thing work? Yes, it does. So my bedroom where I sleep, I got the window shaker air conditioner that runs all night, and the dehumidifier. It's like another planet. It's so comfortable. It's like staying in a really nice hotel. That's what I'm like. I'm like, the air in here is so good. And then I go out into the rest of the house, and it's like it's a swamp. It's like, oh, it's disgusting out here. And I immediately feel like I have to blow my nose, and it just feels terrible. But at least I'm sleeping better. I have more energy. But that's Florida. It's so humid, you have to buy a device to suck the moisture out of the air. It is horrible. It's not a dry heat. It's a very wet heat. It's a very gross, you feel gross the second you step out the door kind of heat. It's the kind of heat that also, if I leave in the afternoon to go work at the grocery store, if I'm closing, and I open my car door, I have to just let it breathe. I put the key in, I turn it on, I turn the air conditioner on a little bit, just to push all that hot air out, or I will die in the car. Excuse me. I'm trying to get all this moisture in my ear. I'm coughing. I really should have hit some type of cough button. That's the more professional thing to do with these types of podcast-esque talks. But I'm trying to think about how being a Florida man has shaped my life. Like, what it is that I do that's sort of different than other people. And that's the fascinating thing to me. So as a child, I really wasn't that into Disney. Well, as like a little kid, I watched all the Disney movies like every other kid did in my generation. But I was more into Universal Studios. Oh, it's 3:33 according to my living room clock. I loved Universal Studios. When Universal Studios came out in the 90s, so I was born in 82. And so I grew up in the 80s and 90s. That defined me. But as much as being an 80s, 90s kid who I identify as Gen X as opposed to being a millennial, even though I'm on that line, I'm past that, I'm like, I still feel like my childhood was more Gen X than millennial. I look at millennials who are like about 10 to 15 years younger than me right now, and they're completely different than me. They lived a completely different life with more influence in their years with social media, etc., etc. I identify. All right, I got to live my truth. I am Gen X. My aunt had an Atari. My first video game system was the classic Nintendo when I was a child. I feel like I'm Gen X. But living in Florida in the 80s and 90s, I had Universal Studios. And because it's a lot cheaper if you live in Florida than it is if you live anywhere else in the country or in another country. I can't imagine those families that travel to another country to go to a theme park. I remember getting into a conversation with a guy that, like a tech support guy that was in the Philippines, and he was talking about going to Disney, and I said, which one do you go to? Do you go to Shanghai Disney or you go to the France Disney? And he said, oh, the France Disney. He's like, even though it's farther away, it's easier to get to. It's politically easier to get to than Shanghai. So I thought that was interesting. He's like, yeah, I don't want to go to Shanghai. So, but for me, like, Universal was right there. Like, Universal Studios. So I had an annual pass. Like, in the 90s, I went to Universal at least, like, once or twice a year. During the times when, like, starting when, like, the Ghostbusters had a show there, that was the most amazing thing, because as a kid, like, the Ghostbusters, it was, like, the most amazing thing. So, Ghostbusters, and then Jaws, Earthquake, Back to the Future, when they made the Back to the Future ride. I didn't care how long I had to stand in line. 3 hours for, like, an 8-minute ride. That's fine. I stood in line 3 hours to ride Back to the Future. I love the theme park. It was just amazing. And I never really went to Disney, though. And I'm kind of sad that I didn't, but I really wasn't into it. I thought it was stupid. At least for kids, you know? And I really wish I went when I was younger. My mother insisted that we go to Disney. I wouldn't say she insisted, like I was like, oh, no, that's stupid. I probably would have been that way as a teenager. It's like, I don't want to go to Epcot. Epcot's lame. It's like no, Epcot was amazing. I don't know how it is now. I have no clue. I can't imagine this at this point in my life standing in line and waiting to ride a ride. I can't imagine that. The way I look at my life, and I'm just like, people got way too much free time if that's what they're doing with their money and their time. Like, I just had to take my car in and get new brake pads and a new tire put on. It was like $714, and I'm like, oh my goodness. I'm like, I'm a little poorer right now, and I got to make all these decisions. Like, I was just eating a cheese sandwich, and it wasn't even good cheese, and it's like what one of my bosses calls a wish sandwich. You wish there was some meat in it. I mean cheese sandwiches on a rainy day. Talking into a microphone to you people. Living in my mobile home, trying to figure out what it is I want to do as a content creator. I'm trying to rebrand myself. I think I might start calling myself a humor artist, but that's a whole nother talk. is I am a cartoonist. I've been a cartoonist since I don't like to put years on any of this stuff, for some time, for a little bit, for a bit, and I've enjoyed doing that. And I enjoy humor. I enjoy making people laugh. I enjoy that type of thing. But as far as content goes, I got to change. The world's changing. I have to change with it. And that's why I'm like, you know what? Tell people about living in Florida. This is not something I normally would. This is not a talk I normally would give. Normally, I want to give a talk about art or entertainment or being creative. And it's like, but what about this? What about this life that you've lived, that all the choices weren't exactly yours? How has it shaped you? We didn't choose the year we were born, but the generation we belong to shapes us. It affects us. Just why maybe we should have a little more sympathy for these young people who are growing up in a very interesting time. No wonder they're a little off. They're a little off. I'm trying to think of polite words. I don't have any polite words, so that's the best one I could come up with. They're a little off. We'll leave it at that. They're on the spectrum of who they are, and I never thought I didn't realize. I should have realized, because there certainly were warning signs, that I would be an old man who looks at the young people and just shakes his head. These young people today, shaking their hips like Elvis, like, I don't know, listening to that rock and roll with their jukebox music and their Pac-Man video games. Like, I don't know, these kids today, like, so how did living in Florida influence me? Well, Universal Studios, it's this huge thing. I don't think I ever would have gotten into Alfred Hitchcock if it wasn't for Universal Studios. They had an attraction there called Alfred Hitchcock, The Art of Making Movies, that mesmerized me. It was amazing. And I remember getting all the Alfred Hitchcock movies on like VHS, anywhere I could find them and things like that. And then DVD collections, and I still have many of them, and I still really love a lot of Alfred Hitchcock movies. As a career, as a total, like all of them, a lot of that crap is boring. The big hits still, I can still watch Vertigo. I can still watch the original Psycho. The Birds is amazing. And then like obscure films like The Trouble with Harry and Frenzy, and I'm trying to think of like some of the other ones. Like my favorites are like Strangers on a Train and Suspicion. And where's my little box set? Yeah, Dial M for Murder's not bad. Foreign Correspondent, good. But I really like Suspicion. North by Northwest, good. Mr. and Mrs. Smith, which is a comedy. It's cute. It's good. But I never would have gotten into Alfred Hitchcock if it wasn't for Universal Studios. I already loved Back to the Future. I already loved Ghostbusters. I feel like I already had watched Jaws. E.T. E.T. was just a thing that just people just knew and just loved. Like, E.T. was just a thing. You just E.T. Everyone had a VHS copy of E.T. Everyone had a VHS copy of Back to the Future. Like, those were things that were just in your house. So Universal Studios, living so close to a theme park and a working studio, was amazing to me as someone who wanted to be like a young filmmaker. Oh, like Universal Studios just felt like my dream. Like I wanted to make movies when I was a young man. So this was incredible that I was living in this new mecca of entertainment. Universal Studios was building it, and then what used to be MGM Studios at Disney, I think it's just called Disney Studios or Hollywood Studios. It's called one of those things. Was also a working production studio. I remember that was the one place I was kind of Disney excited to go to. Was what was then MGM Studios. That was fun. Like the tram tour that they had was really cool. It was it's reminiscent of the Hollywood version of the Universal Studios tour. That was what they were replicating. The Universal one was I loved, but it is lame. Especially if you think about the one from Los Angeles, and you're like, we didn't even go into any buildings and see anything really, really cool. We just drove around the park. Like, that's it. It's like, yeah, but to me, it was still cool. It was just interesting. It was fascinating. So I thought, like, I was going to grow up in this place where it was working production. I was going to work in the movies. Then all of a sudden they moved it to Georgia. And that's like, it never worked. It never worked as a working studio place. Like, my heart broke when they closed down Nickelodeon Studios. That was another thing, Nickelodeon. Oh my goodness, Nickelodeon was such a huge influence on my life. I believe Clarissa Darling was like one of my first TV crushes. Might have been Kate Jackson from Charlie's Angels as a much younger man, or possibly the daughter on Alf. I don't know. There's several possibilities. Daryl Hannah and Splash. Snow White. Snow White was my first movie crush. Like, when I was like 3 years old. I love Snow White. I was in love with Snow White. It was just like everyone knew. My family knew I loved Snow White. I had Snow White posters up in my room. I had a little plastic Snow White, like, I think it was like a bank where you could put coins in her ass, that I just carried around. That was my little girlfriend. So once again, Disney was there early on. And then Universal Studios was my rebellious teen years. And now I just don't care about theme parks. So I don't care about that aspect of living in Florida anymore. I can't. My money goes to car repair as opposed to Disney vacations. Oh my God, you guys. Let's go to Disney this weekend. Like, I don't do that. I've got to repair my car. So, Florida, it's hot. I've never seen snow. I always hated that there were no horror hosts down here. When I was a young man, I got to visit my great-grandmother's place up in Toledo, Ohio, and I got exposed to Dr. Shock's X-Ray Chiller Theater. And Dr. Shock was this huge influence on my childhood as well, and I'm so glad I had that experience living in Ohio. But down here, there are no horror hosts. So, like, a couple years ago, there was, for me, there was Svengoolie. I could watch Svengoolie on MeTV. But as a child, really like Elvira. And like Joe Bob Briggs. And then even like Gilbert Godfrey. And what's her name? That did the Up All Night. The Rhonda Shear. Like, those were my horror hosts. Anyone that like got on like national television. Like that's who I saw. I would even classify Pee Wee Herman not necessarily as a horror host, but as a character actor that I saw on television that I'm like, oh my God, that's fantastic. How do I sign up for that job? I want to do that job. I want to be a horror host. I want to be a character on TV. So I just being this Gen X kid living in Florida. I've never seen snow. I don't travel. I don't go anywhere. I never felt like I was poor when I was younger. I was in the Boy Scouts. I took karate lessons, things like that. But my family didn't manage money very well. So I wasn't taught to manage money very well, though I think I'm better than my family at it. As far as saving, I don't know what to do with my money. So I'm not several generations of wealth or anything like that. Like, I'm just poor Florida trailer trash who just happens to be very creative. And I like that. It's a more interesting life, in my opinion. I've seen stories of people who they start with everything. The game is very boring for them, and they end up self-sabotaging themselves. Drugs, alcohol, illicit behavior. Let's call it that. Reckless, sort of, because they're bored. And my life is very exciting in a terrifying sort of way. Once again, there are signs in my neighborhood that says don't feed alligators, it's illegal. They have to put those there because people feed alligators in my neighborhood. It's an exciting life. It's exciting. This hurricane out here, a little shift, a little butterfly effect, comes right over, boom. My mobile home is gone. That's an exciting life. It's a terrifying, exciting life, isn't it? I don't know what to think about this, especially on a grander spiritual sort of experience. I think I'll end on this very strange note about being a Florida man. I didn't choose this life. But at the same time, I did participate in the parameters of it. Like I can't take away the blame for continuing to be here. I am here. I am embracing it. I am being like water. I am going with it. I didn't make the choices when I was a child to live here. I didn't pack up and leave. I didn't leave Poughkeepsie and move out to Hollywood and make terrible movies a la Ed Wood. And we saw how well that worked out for him. I'm just here in Florida. I'm a Florida man. You know, and I all the horrible things that go with it, and all the things, like, once again, I don't have to shovel snow out of a driveway. I've never seen snow. Never seen it. Never interacted with it. I get excited when I get to play with ice chips, like oh my God, crushed ice. It's the closest thing I've ever gotten to touching snow. You get some crushed ice. I'm like, this is amazing. Is this what snow's like? It's like, no, not at all. Not at all. Here, we'll get you a slushie. We'll no syrup. Maybe you play with that. That's closer to snow. So, I'm happy to be here. It is terrifying. It is hot and sticky. But I'm embracing it. I'm embracing my life. And as a creative professional, I have to say, I have lived a charmed life where I'm not nearly as broken down as I see other people. I think this life would have absolutely destroyed a lesser person. I think there's a lot of strength in what I have endured, and I'm very proud of myself for obtaining mediocrity in the circumstances that I find myself in. I want to continue as a creative person and continue to make art, for a lack of a better word. To make entertainment sounds gross, but it is entertainment. To entertain people, to give people freedom from concern. These are the things I strive for. These are the things I like to do. And I have dedicated a great deal of my life to this, to where other things fall by the wayside. I never got married, never had children. I've been obsessed since I was a child with entertaining people, being an entertainer. And though I have my humble sort of beginnings and roots and my creativity, and as a creative you often have a scattered consciousness, and I've had times where I have focused that my mind just said, hey, I'm going to give you an example for the people of a scattered consciousness. And it went off on it. It did its own thing there for a second. Through things like meditation, which I've really got to get back into doing, I have managed to focus my energy, and I'm hoping to continue to focus my energy here through these talks. It feels good. It feels good to talk to you people about a little piece of my life, about being a Florida man. And I've been to the very nice hotel where they shot scenes for the first Bad Boys movie. That's interesting. It's down in Miami. I've been to Miami. I've seen a store that evidently is owned by a Kardashian. like that's, I think, Khloe and the other one's little boutique store. It's like, that's the Kardashians. I had to have an ex-girlfriend tell me that. I didn't know. We were doing a little tour of Miami. It's like, that's okay. That's it. All right. I'm a Florida man, but I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that I would leave this place. A couple years ago, I thought I was going to move out to California, and then a plague descended upon us. Right, about 2 years before the plague happened, I was going to move out to California, and I'm so glad I didn't. I'm so glad I continued to be a Florida man, and in the times that we living in. I feel it's better here, and yeah, I think I'm here for a while. My mind is more focused on creating like a funny cartoon thing or a funny video than it is about getting the hell out of what is essentially hell for most people. This is hell. And it's hot, and the people are awful. And if you've ever watched an episode of Cops, like there's a 90% chance it was filmed not just in my state, but in my area, like in the county that I live in. It was like always like, yeah, I know that gas station. It really is horrible down here in America's wiener, and I have no intention of leaving. I just kind of go with it. I didn't make the decision to live here, but I guess I have made the decision to stay, and that's an important distinction. So there you go. I want to thank you so much for listening to this rather unusual sort of interlude of personal things that I normally don't share. I usually like to have a little bit of mystery to what that's probably not true. I don't know. Oh, I'm coughing again. Oh, the moisture's in my body. I gotta go get in the room with the dehumidifier. I want to thank you so much for listening. You can find me anywhere on the internet, anywhere on the social medias at JARHUMOR. You can find me at jarhumor.com. This is Florida Man JARHUMOR signing off.